Well, after all the anticipation, all the waiting, and all the build-up, today is finally the day that we enter the Grand Line. But before we do, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this video with a friend, and join the Discord down below. And with all that being said, let's jump into One Piece Volume 12, The Legend Begins, featuring chapters 100 to 108. Part 1, Entering the Grand Line. This will cover chapters 100 to 102. We have finally hit the first triple-digit chapter in our story, and Oda pays off this milestone by starting the volume with the introduction of a mysterious man, wearing a hooded cloak, as a quote from Gold Roger fills the panels. These are things that cannot be stopped: inherited will, the destiny of an age, and the dreams of its people. As long as people seek the answer of freedom, these things will never cease to be. I think it is fitting that we open with a quote from Gold Roger, the man who was killed in Loguetown, and the man who inspired this entire journey. Now, back to the main story. We pick up right where we left off in the last volume, as Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji rush back to the Mary to hightail it out of Loguetown. This is when we see Zoro have a confrontation with Tashigi, and we clearly see that Zoro has some difficulty dealing with female swordsmen stemming from his childhood relationship with Kuina. But more importantly, Luffy and Sanji are forced to contend with the Plume fruit abilities held by the imposing Captain Smoker. There are going to be a few moments throughout One Piece that I will be repeating this sentiment, and this is certainly one of those times. I could only imagine what first-time readers felt seeing Captain Smoker's powers on display for the first time. Right before he faces off against Luffy, we see Smoker take out Buggy, Alvida, and Buggy's entire crew simply using his smoke. And more importantly, as he faces off against Luffy and Sanji, we find out a terrible truth about this new marine force. His body is completely made of smoke, preventing Luffy or Sanji from causing him any harm. I mean, wow, what a way to set up how powerful future foes are, but also how distinct Smoker is from the rest of the Marines we have seen thus far. In the last volume, after Smoker was introduced as a rough, intimidating commander, we watch as he pays for a little girl's ice cream after she walked into his leg. This immediately shows us that Smoker is not about his position, and that he truly cares about protecting people and fulfilling his duties as a Marine. And you know what? Here we are. He has Luffy in his clutches, and as he's about to take out our main character, something truly unexpected happens.
さあ、それはどうかな。てめえは。
Dragon stepping in and allowing the crew to escape works on so many levels, but the most important reason why it works is because we have zero context for anything that has happened. Dragon saved Luffy, Smoker denotes Dragon as one of the most wanted criminals in the world, and Dragon smiles as he watched Luffy and the others sail away. And even better, we don't get any more context than this. We simply have Smoker and Tashigi vowing to enter the Grand Line and chase after Luffy and the gang. This is when arguably the most iconic scene in early One Piece happens, as the crew all make vows before entering the Grand Line. Sanji to find the All Blue, Luffy to become the king of the pirates, Zoro to become the world's best swordsman, Nami to chart a map of the world, and Usopp to become a brave warrior of the sea. This is a fantastic scene, calling back to the very dreams that brought all of these characters together. And wow, that must mean it's time to enter the Grand Line and get into the swing of things. Right? No, not at all. As it turns out, entering the Grand Line is incredibly difficult and treacherous. The crew contends with sea beasts in the calm belt, figuring out the entry point to Reverse Mountain, and after nearly crashing into the railing, watch as the crew finally enters Reverse Mountain and arrive at the Grand Line. All of the trouble and obstacles Oda has put these characters through has finally built up to this very moment. And let me just say, the sense of adventure I feel reading this story, and specifically this scene, brings me back to how I felt reading tales such as The Odyssey, or the early Fantastic Four comics, and Percy Jackson, all over again. The sense of adventure, wonder, and pure excitement about diving into the unknown has me unbelievably excited to continue sharing this adventure with you. But, like always, as things start going well for our heroes, things take a drastic swerve, as we encounter a giant whale who destroys part of our ship and eats the Going Merry in one giant gulp. Part 2, Laboon the Whale. This will cover chapters 103 to 105. This section of the volume starts off with a bang, as we are introduced to a ton of moving parts from the very beginning, and they get more wacky as we move forward. Zoro, Sanji, Usopp, and Nami are in the belly of the whale that has been painted to appear to look like the outside world, and they encounter a man living on a metallic island inside the whale named Crocus. Luffy enters the whale through its spout and encounters two shady figures who go by the names of Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday. And oh, if that wasn't enough, the whale has a door that leads out of it, and Crocus just dives into the whale's stomach acid? Okay, what the heck is going on? Long story short, Crocus is a doctor who has been taking care of the whale, who is named Laboon, for some time, and took up refuge inside the whale's body as a vacation spot. But he also administers medicine to sedate the whale here. The two characters known as Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday are whalers who are attempting to use Laboon to feed their island. And I have to say, one of the panels that was funny for me was Sanji avoiding a political debate. Like, way to use your social skills, man. Proud of you, buddy. But as we exit the whale, Crocus tells us more about Laboon's backstory. Like with most of the characters we've encountered so far, the initial appearance of the whale does not tell the whole story. Laboon has been extremely depressed because he lost his friends. Crocus was a former doctor of a pirate ship who took up refuge at the bottom of Reverse Mountain. And 50 years ago, good-natured pirates entered the Grand Line from the West Blue with an island whale. Island whales are found in the West Blue, and their kind travel in packs, meaning that when Laboon discovered the ship, he followed them into the Grand Line. For Laboon's safety, the pirates told him to remain with Crocus, but promised him that they would return for him once they circumnavigated the world. But sadly, based on reliable sources, Crocus confirmed something awful. The pirates abandoned their journey and escaped from the Grand Line, leaving Laboon behind. Despite Crocus's attempts to relay this information to Laboon multiple times, Laboon refuses to listen, and repeatedly bangs his head against the red line separating the four oceans, in hopes that continuously banging his head will lead to the red line breaking and allowing Laboon to return to his friends. The scars on Laboon's head represent how broken the creature is on the inside and now on the outside. His only dream has been dashed, but he continues to not give up, and has never truly lost faith in his friends. Something that Luffy takes note of and responds by stabbing him? Luffy and Laboon fight, and this is for an important purpose for sure, but I actually love that this mirrors Luffy's dedication to Nami, which we just saw through the events of Arlong Park. Despite Nami telling Luffy to leave her alone and that she had conned him this entire time, Luffy never stopped believing in Nami as his friend, and in the end, Nami returned to the crew. And Luffy's wait paid off. Luffy ends the fight in a draw, saying that when his crew returns to Reverse Mountain, they will fight again, and paints his own Jolly Roger on Laboon's head, telling him that if he continues to bang his head against the red line, the Jolly Roger will smear, so he needs to stop in order to preserve the painting. Luffy, in his own special way, brought the whale hope, and allowed the whale to continue his dream of waiting for his friends to return. Maybe not the same group of pirates he's been waiting for the last 50 years, but a new group who have instilled faith in the giant mammal once again. While Laboon is the main focus of this section, we are also introduced to the concept of a log pose, the navigation tool used to traverse the Grand Line. This concept is pretty ingenious by Oda, as the magnetic waves of the Grand Line prevent typical navigation. In order to properly navigate the Grand Line, you must use the magnetic readings of each island and follow the path set by the log pose. This not only gives Nami a new gimmick that she'll need to figure out, but it also gives our characters an in-world reason to stay on islands for prolonged periods of time, and also does an extremely effective job world building. As while there are certain islands that we will be traveling to, there are many that we won't get to see. It all depends on what the log pose says. This sets up the next part of the volume as Luffy agrees to bring Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday home to Whiskey Peak, and Crocus gives Nami his log pose, after Sanji found a very creative way to destroy the one owned by Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday, and as the crew departs, Laboon and Crocus gives us a small hint at the ship he formerly occupied, reminiscing on his old pal, Gold Roger, and the young pirates he just met. Part 3, Baroque Works. This will cover chapters 106 to 108. While this final part of the volume primarily deals with the introduction of the crime syndicate known as Baroque Works, it starts off dealing with Nami realizing how treacherous travel on the Grand Line will be. Not necessarily because of the obstacles placed before them, but mainly due to the constantly changing climates and the always adjusting magnetic reading of the log post. I think this opening scene serves two important purposes. First, it enables Oda to show off his creative and artistic muscles by establishing drastically different environments and weather that changes constantly. This opens up the door for him to have free reign when creating future settings, but also gives him creative freedom when establishing the layout and climate of these respective regions, which will improve his overall story by making these islands feel more distinct from one another. I find it incredibly easy in most stories to simply retcon something at a later point if you want to change up an element of a story, but Oda quite clearly planned for a ton of islands with different climates and settings in the future, so instead of writing himself into a creative hole, he makes most of the situation and finds a one-size-fits-all solution. Seriously, 10 out of 10, Oda, you did it again. The second thing I want to point out is how vital the Straw Hat Pirates are as a unit. They all work together to make sure that the ship gets back on track and fight through the elements. And more importantly, they trust each other. There's not a single moment where anyone on the crew questions Nami's decision making. And this shows that outside of their friendship, these guys genuinely trust each other and are willing to lend a hand. Well, everyone except Zoro, but hey, he will have his time to shine here in a minute, as the crew finally makes their grand entrance to Whiskey Peak. As the group arrives, we immediately watch as Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday abandon ship, and as the crew cautiously make their way towards land, we discover something interesting about Whiskey Peak. This island celebrates pirates, and they throw a giant party in honor of the pirates' arrival. The party is brought on by the mayor of Whiskey Peak, Igaram. My manga called him Igaropi, and for once I actually think that my butchering of a name is justified. And he presents the pirates with tons of alcohol and food, causing the pirates to pass out from either being hungover, stuffed, or exhausted. Now, if you remember back a few minutes ago, I mentioned that Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday were attempting to kill Laboon to bring food to their island, and considering this is their island, they shouldn't have been able to give Luffy and the gang all this food, right? Well, that's correct, because this island is simply a base for the evil Baroque Works. Mayor Igaram is secretly Mr. 8, and the nun who drank with Nami is secretly Miss Monday. And the crew was purposely led to Whiskey Peak by Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday so they could collect a bounty on Luffy's head. And honestly, it looks like they will succeed, but oh, wait. Zoro sensed something was up and he is here to crash the party. This is my favorite part of the volume, and it's the last thing I'm going to talk about today. Zoro not only knows about Baroque Works, the fact that they're an evil organization who is an unknown man leading them, but he was recruited by them some time ago and declined their offer. And thanks to the live action, we get to see Mr. 7 attempt to recruit Zoro. And this is when Zoro absolutely dominates the Baroque Works agents on Whiskey Peak, single-handedly and without a whole lot of effort. Zoro is such an amazing character because his moments shine in the most epic of ways. And this volume ends off with Zoro defeating Miss Monday as he prepares to face off against Mr. 8, Mr. 9, and Miss Wednesday in the next volume. That does it for the episode today. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this video with a friend, and join the Discord down below. And make sure to check back in next week for volumes 13 and 14. But until then, have a great weekend and take care.